You see them in parks in most big cities. People exercising and meditating to the teachings of Falun Gong. Practitioners say it heals body and mind. Well, you've probably heard of Falun Gong as a persecuted spiritual movement, and it really is. The Chinese Communist Party has done terrible things to it. But you probably haven't heard that Falun Gong has also become one of the most determined backers of Donald Trump. In recent years, it's morphed from being a fringe quasi-religion to being a big player in America's conservative media establishment. So what is going on at Falun Gong? In this joint investigation with ABC Radio's Background Briefing, we're taking you around the world to find out.
We just want to ask you if Master Lee is here.
In New York State, we'll visit the base of its reclusive leader, Master Lee, a former government clerk who believes aliens walk the earth.
They see him as a god, they see him as the creator of the universe.
We'll hear from a former follower who blames him for ruining her life.
It tore my family apart.
In Sydney, we'll meet a woman who believes Falun Gong's aversion to modern medicine caused her mother's death.
If they get them in long enough, they're gone. I didn't realise how far down the rabbit hole Mum was.
And we'll investigate how media outlets set up by Falun Gong practitioners have spent millions to bolster Donald Trump.
Over the last 2.5 years, we've been reporting on the Trump administration honestly and without any false narratives.
Two hours' drive from New York City, ringed by the forests of the Shongum Mountains, is the headquarters of Falun Gong.
You have to go a little bit off-road up this gravelly path that's very steep, and then you get to this beautiful lake area with hills around and these Tang Dynasty temples.
One former follower, who wants to be known only as Anna, started coming here as a child after her parents joined the movement.
It wasn't like being in a place of spiritual bliss for me. It was more like being in a place of judgment, because part of the practice is Master Lee can read everyone's mind at all times. I grew up with this notion that my thoughts were always being monitored.
With a Chinese mother and a European father, she soon learned she was different from the other children.
The leader of Falun Gong claims that race mixing in humans is part of an alien plot to drive humanity further from the gods. My mother read that part of the texts to me when I was about 11, which was a lot to take in, to hear that coming from not only the religion or practice that you're believing in, but from your own mother. It was very damaging.
Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, started in China in 1992. It was based on traditional meditation and breathing exercises called Qigong. But its founder, Li Hongzhi, added a supernatural layer. It would prepare people to return home to heavenly kingdoms where they had once dwelled. It would even teach practitioners to levitate. By the end of the 1990s, he had tens of millions of followers in China. The communist leadership saw that as a threat to its own grip on power and banned the movement. I began covering Falun Gong almost 20 years ago when I was the ABC's China correspondent. In my first week, I was among a handful of journalists taken to a re-education camp for Falun Gong members. Tens of thousands of practitioners had been locked up indefinitely to force them to renounce the movement.
当他们摆脱了李洪志的精神控制之后，精神面貌焕然一新，以积极的态度来对待生活，对政府的挽救充满。
The Chinese Communist Party had branded Falun Gong an evil cult, but it was behaving like a cult itself, demanding robotic obedience.
法轮功是邪教。
And you?
法轮功是邪教。
And you?
法轮功是邪教。
Li Hongzhi had moved to the United States 5 years earlier and was building Falun Gong into an international movement.
我教人呢，只是教人向善，教人祛病健身，教人达到更高的道德标准，更高的思想境界，使人的心都变好。
Master Li set up a retreat in Deer Park, a ring of rural hamlets in New York State. Grace Woodard's family has lived in the area for generations. She says locals at first welcomed the new arrivals.
They had a public presentation with a diorama of the temples and rather beautifully done of what was going to be built at Dragon Springs. People thought, this is interesting.
For 2 decades, the Falun Gong complex has been steadily expanding, even building a school and a dance and music college.
This is all theirs off to the right.
Outside the complex, practitioners have been buying up houses and land.
And this whole area they wanted to put their shopping mall in, all along here. Hey, Frank.
Hi, Grace. How are you?
Pretty good.
Grace and her friend Frank Ketchum are in a residents' action group called Deer Park Rural Alliance, set up in opposition to Dragon Springs expansion.
Yeah.
They regularly trek through the state forest to try to work out what's going on in the compound.
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite a hike for you, Grace.
Well, it would be great if I'd had both my hips done, but I haven't. Okay. All right.
Well, if the bear comes,
Yes?
all I got to do is run faster than you, right?
As they near the lookout, they pass a surveillance camera.
Is it a camera?
Yeah.
Well, hello. The local communists are here.
Frank's property overlooks Dragon Springs and he's been documenting the building works.
Just got out of control when they started building the schools.
Their alliance has accused Falun Gong of violating environmental and building codes.
You know, 8-story building that was never approved and doesn't have fire protection.
Falun Gong, in turn, has sued the local authority.
You know, their concern is all the time that all they're doing is trying to save people in China from being persecuted. No matter what they do here is all for the people in China that are being persecuted. And I don't see that as a reason to ignore local building codes and local laws and environmental laws that, you know, are made to protect the people that are in those buildings and protect the environment.
One of their concerns is that Dragon Springs won't let them inside to see what they're building.
There's no transparency. They're doing their own thing. It's like the Forbidden City. You know, only certain people can go in.
It looks like this is the entrance right here.
We sent our New York producer, Karishma Vyas, to visit the Dragon Springs compound.
Hello, good morning, sir. We just want to ask you if Master Li is here. We are looking for an interview with Master Li. Is he available?
Master Li doesn't live here.
Okay, he doesn't live here. Is the spokesperson, Mr. Jonathan Li, available?
Jonathan Li is the Vice President of Dragon Springs.
1 second, let me make a call.
Okay, thank you. Looks like the security guards really don't know what to do with us.
As they waited, security called the local police.
There's a police car. Hi, good morning. I didn't realise you had been called for us, but I'm happy to explain what we're doing.
Jonathan Li agreed to be interviewed in a nearby town at a store owned by a practitioner.
Shall I go in?
He says the high security is to stop the Chinese embassy infiltrating.
We have seen embassy cars that's roaming around in the early days when we started. We see embassy cars. We block them and then call the police. But now they are smarter. They are always having people in and out.
He says Dragon Springs follows all planning and environmental rules and provides a haven for refugees from China.
It's all ordinary people who practice Falun Gong. They want to have a sanctuary, especially people who was persecuted and their kids, their parents has died.
Anna is now 25. For her, Dragon Springs was never a sanctuary. Looking back, she says her mother became more distant the more time she spent with Falun Gong.
Part of the whole premise of the practice is getting rid of your human attachments in order to attain salvation. I think that a lot of parents in the practice sort of conflate human attachment with just basic parental love.
Her mother's dream was for Anna to become a Shenyun dancer. This is a professional troupe based in the compound and promoted heavily on Falun Gong's social media.
This season, take an incredible journey through 5,000 years of culture with Shenyun.
Before COVID, it toured the world constantly, raising the movement's global profile.
She thought that it was the highest honor and that it would guarantee me getting into heaven, essentially. But I was not a very good dancer, or I wasn't very interested in dancing to begin with. There was one day where the ballet teacher came up to me and she placed me in front of the mirror. She lifted up my shirt, grabbed my stomach, shook it, and then turned to the other kids in the class, there were several of them, and said, "Do you see this, everyone? This is an example of how a woman should not look."
At the age of 13, she was hospitalized with severe anorexia. She says her mother rejected the hospital's treatment plan.
They wanted to include medication, and she refused because Falun Gong has a principle where you are absolutely not allowed to have any kind of medical treatment. It means you are a bad practitioner. It means you do not fully trust Master Li.